She never imagined her life could unravel so quickly. Just 1 week ago, everything still felt manageable. Not easy, not perfect, but stable enough to keep going. But now, standing in the middle of her apartment with bills scattered across the table and her hands trembling, she felt the sharp reality of collapse settling into her bones. It was the kind of fear that didn't make noise, it hollowed you out from the inside. In the span of 7 days, everything had shifted. A sudden layoff. A payment she depended on that never arrived. A medical bill she didn't expect. And then the email from her landlord reminding her of rent due in 5 days. Each moment hit her like a wave, until she could no longer tell where one fear ended and another began. It all blurred together into a single, heavy silence. Her chest ached as she looked around the room. Everything looked the same plants by the window, the same books on the shelf, the same soft light spilling across the floor, but she didn't feel the same. It was as if life had quietly cracked beneath her feet, and only now was she realizing how fragile the ground beneath her had been. She sank onto the floor, back against the sofa, letting the weight of exhaustion settle into her body. Her breath felt shallow, shaky, uncertain. She pressed a hand against her forehead as if trying to hold herself together, but the pressure did nothing to quiet the storm spiraling inside her. She had held so much for so long, and now it felt like everything had finally spilled over. Tears blurred her vision, not because she was weak but because she was tired of fighting, tired of pretending, tired of trying to be strong for a life that kept breaking under her feet. She let the tears fall quietly, each one carrying the truth she hadn't said out loud. She didn't know how to fix this. She didn't even know where to start. A part of her wanted to scream, to beg for help, to undo the week that had taken everything from her. But she didn't have the energy for anger. Only a quiet ache spread through her chest, the kind that comes when you realize you've reached your limit. She wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to anchor herself in something that didn't feel like collapse. Her phone buzzed again, another reminder, another number she couldn't face. She turned it over, screen down, and let out a shaky breath. She didn't want to see any more bad news. She didn't want to be confronted with another demand she couldn't meet. All she wanted, in that moment, was stillness. Just one moment where the world wasn't asking her for more than she had. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the sofa, feeling the strain in her neck, the heaviness in her eyelids. For a long moment, she allowed herself to disappear into the quiet, into the darkness behind her closed eyes. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how she would survive the next few days. Everything felt uncertain, unstable, and painfully fragile. But somewhere in the thick silence of that moment, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, there was something faint. Not hope. Not clarity. Just a small, almost imperceptible shift in the air around her. As if something unseen had stepped closer. As if the collapse she feared so deeply was preparing to open a door she didn't even know existed. She didn't feel it fully yet. She wouldn't understand it for days. But the universe had begun moving. Quietly. Intentionally. Toward her. Even as everything in her life fell apart, something bigger than her fear had already started to rebuild what she thought was lost forever. The next morning didn't bring relief, it brought reality. A heavy, undeniable, unavoidably sharp reality. She woke with the same tightness in her chest, the same ache in her stomach, the same buzzing fear beneath her skin. The sunlight through the curtains felt almost cruel, illuminating the mess she had hoped would disappear overnight. Nothing had changed. Her bank account was still frozen in its silence, and the world still demanded more than she had to give. She moved through the morning like someone walking underwater, slow, heavy, disoriented. She opened her email and felt her heart sink with each unread message. A notice from the bank. Another bill. A reminder from her landlord. A subscription renewal she had forgotten about. Every subject line felt like a blow, a reminder that life wasn't pausing just because she was falling apart. She reached for a glass of water, but her hands trembled so much she nearly dropped it. She wasn't someone who gave up easily. She had survived heartbreak, disappointment, long nights of work, and dreams that took years to unfold. But this was different. This was the kind of exhaustion that seeped into her bones, the kind that made even breathing feel like a task she wasn't sure she could keep doing. The silence around her grew thicker, pressing against her ribs, making her feel smaller by the second. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt this defeated. It wasn't just about money. It was the sense of losing control, of watching her life slip through her fingers while she stood there powerless. It was the fear of failing quietly, invisibly, without anyone noticing how hard she had tried. As she sat at the edge of her bed, her shoulders folded forward and her breath uneven, something inside her whispered that maybe this was it, maybe she had reached the point where she couldn't fight anymore. Admitting that truth hurt more than the bills piling up. She had always been the one who pushed through, who kept going no matter what. But now, her strength felt thin, stretched, worn down to threads. In that fragile moment, as her eyes burned and her heartbeat echoed through her chest, she placed a hand over her heart, gently, as if apologizing to herself for expecting so much. She whispered the only truth she had left. She didn't know how much longer she could do this. The words tasted like defeat, but they were real. And maybe that honesty was the only thing keeping her from breaking completely. Yet even in that rawness, her story wasn't done. Her journey wasn't ending here. And if someone watching this feels the heaviness of life pressing on them the same way, she would want them to stay close, to walk this next part with her. Because no one should face moments like these alone. If this story is touching your heart, take a breath and anchor your energy with a single word in the comments: strength. Sometimes one word becomes the spark that keeps a soul from giving up. And if you feel called, subscribe to this channel so we can walk through healing, rebuilding, and awakening together. Your presence here matters more than you know. And if someone in your life is quietly fighting their own battles, the kind they never talk about, consider sharing this video with them. You never know when a story becomes the reminder someone needs to keep going. The universe weaves healing in unexpected ways, and sometimes it begins with a simple act of connection. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm that had no center, no direction, no end. She tried to keep her mind busy, tried to stay productive, tried to pretend she still had control, but every small task reminded her of what she had lost. Even simple things, like opening the fridge or checking her messages, felt heavier now, as if the air itself was thicker around her. The weight of everything pressed into her thoughts, bending them toward the same conclusion: life had slipped into a place she never wanted to be. She replayed the events of the week over and over, looking for a moment where she could have changed the ending. Maybe she should have said something differently. Maybe she should not have trusted certain people. Maybe she should have seen the warning signs earlier. Those thoughts circled her mind relentlessly, tightening like a rope around her chest. And even though she knew she couldn't rewrite the past, her heart kept searching for a version of the story where everything didn't fall apart at once. Late at night, when the world outside went quiet, the silence inside her amplified everything she tried to ignore during the day. She felt the sharp edges of fear settling in her chest, the ache of uncertainty creeping down her spine. She tried to convince herself she wasn't alone, but the truth was harder to swallow in the dark. The shadows in her room felt like reflections of the shadows inside her, the doubts, the regrets, the unanswered questions she carried like stones. She looked at the ceiling as if it could hold her together. She wished someone would sit beside her, even in silence, just to remind her she didn't have to be strong all the time. The exhaustion from pretending weighed more than the financial collapse itself. It wasn't just a loss of money, it was a loss of safety, a loss of stability, a loss of the future she thought she was building. That kind of loss didn't simply fade. It lingered. It softened her voice and dimmed her eyes. Every knock at the door startled her. Every unknown number triggered a spike of anxiety. Every email notification set her pulse racing. She felt trapped between what had already happened and what might still collapse. It was a strange space, not quite disaster, not quite recovery, just a heavy, stretched out waiting. It hollowed her, leaving her fragile in ways she didn't know how to express, even to herself. Some mornings, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The light in her eyes flickered, overshadowed by sleepless nights and the constant pressure buried beneath her ribs. She traced the shape of her own face with her gaze, searching for something familiar, strength, hope, courage, but all she saw was someone trying too hard to hold on while everything around her crumbled. Yet even in the middle of all that pain, something inside her refused to disappear completely. A tiny ember, faint but persistent. A small reminder that she had survived other storms before. That she had once believed in better things. That she had once held visions of a future where she wasn't this tired, this scared, this lost. That ember didn't ask for anything, it just existed, quietly, waiting. She didn't tell anyone what she was going through. Not because she didn't trust people, but because she didn't know how to put her pain into words. How do you explain a collapse that isn't just financial? How do you express a fear that lives in your bloodstream? How do you share a heaviness that makes even breathing feel like an effort? She carried those emotions alone, tucking them into the corners of her routine, hiding them behind forced smiles and practiced reassurances. Every night, as she closed her eyes, she hoped for a sign that things would shift, that something would break the cycle of fear and uncertainty. She hoped for one small moment that could remind her she wasn't meant to drown in this. Though hope was faint, it was still alive, a quiet heartbeat beneath the noise of her collapse. Even if she didn't know it yet, that small, stubborn ember inside her was the beginning of something new. A beginning the universe was already preparing to reveal. The collapse didn't stop with the bills. It seeped quietly into areas of her life she didn't expect. Her routines began to unravel. Mornings that once held clarity now felt foggy and disorienting. Even simple actions, brushing her hair, making her bed, preparing breakfast, felt heavier than they should. The world hadn't changed, but her ability to hold it together had. Every movement felt like an echo of the weight she carried inside. She tried to distract herself with tasks, hoping productivity would numb the fear running beneath her skin. But every attempt only reminded her of how fragile her foundation had become. She couldn't focus long enough to finish anything. Her mind drifted, circling the same fears again and again. The more she tried to escape them, the louder they grew. It was like living inside a storm she couldn't silence. She avoided her reflection now. Not because she didn't want to see herself, but because she didn't want to face the truth she carried in her eyes. They had lost their spark, that quiet confidence she once trusted. Instead, she saw exhaustion, disappointment, a faint tremble of fear. She saw a woman who had been trying for too long without support, without rest, without a moment to breathe. Messages from friends went unread. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to say, "I'm not okay." It felt easier to stay silent than to unravel in front of someone who might not understand the depth of what she was feeling. So she withdrew into herself, a quiet retreat into solitude, not out of choice, but necessity. At night, she lay awake replaying the week that changed everything. The unexpected bill. The delayed payment. The client who backed out without warning. The emergency expense she hadn't planned for. Each event alone was manageable, but together they created a domino effect she couldn't outrun. It was astonishing how fast life could shift, how one week could undo years of effort. Her mind drifted into memories of times she had believed in herself without hesitation. Times when she trusted her intuition, her resilience, her path. Remembering that version of herself hurt more than the financial collapse. It reminded her of what she used to feel: certainty, clarity, direction, emotions that now seemed distant, almost unreachable. She sat on the floor one evening, her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. The room was dim except for the soft glow of a lamp in the corner. The quiet around her was so deep it felt like another presence in the room. She pressed her forehead against her knees, feeling the slow, rhythmic pulse of her own heartbeat. She didn't cry this time. She was past the point of tears. This was a deeper exhaustion, the kind that emptied everything. The world outside continued moving as if nothing had happened. People laughed, worked, planned, lived, while she stayed suspended in a space between collapse and survival. Days blurred. Hours stretched. And inside her, something fragile kept whispering that she wasn't meant to stay here forever, even if she couldn't yet see a way out. Her body felt tight, heavy, tense from carrying worries that had no immediate solution. But somewhere beneath the layers of fear, something softer attempted to rise. A faint, almost imperceptible reminder that this moment, as painful as it was, wasn't the end. It was a threshold. A breaking point that would someday reveal a beginning. She didn't know it yet, but the universe was already moving pieces in her favor. Quietly. Invisibly. Preparing the moment when her story would shift. The fifth morning arrived with the same heaviness as the ones before it. She moved slowly from the bed, not because she wanted to, but because her body felt weighted by something invisible. Each step carried the imprint of a week filled with losses. She walked to the kitchen and stood still for a moment, staring at the fragments of her routine that no longer felt like hers. The coffee mug, the small plant by the window, the soft hum of the refrigerator, they all seemed like pieces of a life she was no longer fully living. She forced herself to sit at the table, hoping structure might give her a sense of grounding. But the quiet around her felt louder than ever. It was the kind of silence that didn't soothe, it exposed. It showed her everything she had avoided facing. The buried fears. The beliefs that whispered she was running out of time. The heaviness that clung to her ribs like a shadow she couldn't outrun. She folded her hands together, staring at them as if the answers might be written on her skin. She reached for her phone out of habit, scrolling through notifications she didn't want to read. More reminders of what she owed. More alerts she wished she could ignore. Her chest tightened with each message, as if the world was asking her to carry more than she had the strength for. She set the phone down and closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, letting the air leave her body in a long, trembling stream. She didn't know how to keep going, but she also didn't know how to stop. The weight of responsibility felt sharper that day. She had always been someone who figured things out, someone who pushed through obstacles without hesitation. But now, even that part of her felt distant, dulled by exhaustion and worry. She wondered how someone could lose so much in such a short time. It didn't seem fair, and yet fairness had never been a guarantee in life. What she faced now was something deeper than misfortune, it was the unfamiliar territory of losing trust in her own path. She walked to the window, drawn to the light even though she didn't feel ready to face the world outside. Cars passed, people hurried down the sidewalk, conversations floated through the air, as if life continued with or without her. She placed her fingertips against the cool glass, feeling the distance between her inner world and the one unfolding beyond the windowpane. That distance made her chest ache in a way she couldn't describe, a quiet ache born from wanting to move forward but not knowing how. She leaned her head against the window frame, allowing herself a moment of stillness. No solutions. No plans. Just breathing. Her reflection stared back at her faintly, framed by morning light, tired eyes, softened expression, a woman who had held too much for too long. She didn't turn away. Instead, she studied the subtle strength hidden beneath the exhaustion. Even though she didn't feel strong, there was something in her gaze that refused to collapse entirely. As the minutes passed, a faint shift stirred inside her, not hope, not yet, but something quieter. A sense that she was still here, still breathing, still standing. The collapse had shaken her deeply, but it hadn't erased her. There was a part of her that persisted, even in silence. A part that believed that pain didn't arrive without purpose, even if that purpose remained unseen. She walked back to the table and sat down again, resting her hands in her lap. The air around her felt different now, not lighter, but clearer. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know how she would rebuild. But she felt a small shift in the rhythm of the moment, as if the universe was quietly repositioning something beneath her feet. She couldn't see it, but she sensed it, a subtle rearrangement, a gentle preparation for what was coming. Her breathing steadied. Her shoulders softened. The heaviness stayed, but it no longer felt like the end of her story. She didn't have clarity. She didn't have answers. But she had presence, and that alone was a beginning. A fragile one, but a beginning nonetheless. And somewhere beyond her awareness, the universe had already chosen the exact moment her path would shift. It was closer than she imagined. On the sixth evening, when her mind felt too tired to keep circling the same fears, she stepped outside for a walk, not because she wanted fresh air, but because the walls of her apartment felt too tight around her. The sky was fading into soft shades of violet and gold, the kind of sunset that usually calmed her, though tonight she barely noticed it. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts spill into the rhythm of her steps. She didn't know where she was going, only that staying still felt impossible. As she turned a corner near a quiet side street, something caught her eye, a small shop she had never noticed before. Its window glowed with warm amber light, filled with books, candles, soft fabrics, and little objects that seemed to hum with meaning. It looked like the kind of place someone walked into during a transition, a place that stayed invisible until the exact moment it was needed. She hesitated for a moment, feeling an unexpected pull toward it, as if something inside was calling her in. She stepped through the doorway, greeted by the soft scent of sandalwood and old paper. The shop felt timeless, untouched by the rush of the world outside. Shelves were lined with journals, crystals, worn books about healing, handwritten cards with affirmations, and small bowls filled with objects that looked older than memory. The air felt warm, gentle, like a sanctuary she didn't know she needed. As she walked deeper into the store, something inside her began to settle. Near the back of the room, on a wooden table illuminated by a single golden lamp, she saw it, a simple, beautiful journal with a textured midnight blue cover and delicate gold lines that shimmered like constellations. It wasn't flashy, but something about it made her pause. It felt familiar somehow, as if her hands had been searching for it long before she ever saw it. She reached toward it slowly, brushing her fingertips across the cover, and a soft warmth spread through her chest. The shopkeeper appeared beside her, an older woman with gentle eyes and a smile that felt like a quiet blessing. She didn't speak at first, she simply looked at the journal in the woman's hands and nodded, as though she recognized the moment unfolding. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, steady, and impossibly comforting. "That one has been waiting for someone," she said. It wasn't a sales pitch. It was a knowing. A whisper of something greater. The words settled into her heart like a key sliding into the right lock. She didn't know why, but tears welled up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the strange, overwhelming sensation of being guided. As she held the journal, a quiet strength rose inside her, something she hadn't felt in weeks. It was subtle, like a breath of clarity moving through her, reminding her that collapse didn't erase destiny. She opened the journal slowly, and inside the first page, handwritten in delicate ink, was a single phrase: "What you write here shapes what the universe builds for you." The words landed softly but deeply, awakening something she had forgotten, the idea that she wasn't powerless, that intention had weight, that creation began long before results appeared. She traced the words with her fingertip, feeling a spark where fear had been for days. In that moment, the journal didn't feel like an object, it felt like a doorway. A light. A shift in energy. A small but undeniable sign that the universe hadn't turned its back on her. It had simply been waiting for her to reach this exact point of surrender, where she was open enough to receive something new. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of alignment, like life was gently nudging her toward a path she hadn't been able to see. She bought the journal without hesitation. As she stepped back into the cool evening air, holding it close to her chest, something inside her felt different. The fear was still there, but it no longer drowned out everything else. There was a new sensation beside it, a quiet, fragile hope, like the first flicker of dawn breaking through the night. She didn't understand the fullness of what had just begun, but she felt it. The turning of a page. The beginning of something sacred. A shift the universe had been preparing since the moment her life collapsed. And now, finally, she was ready to receive it. She sat on her couch that night with the journal resting softly in her hands, the lamp beside her casting a warm glow over the room. Everything around her was quiet, but for the first time in days, the silence didn't feel hostile. It felt intentional, like the universe had paused the world long enough for her to begin something new. She opened the journal slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest, steady and sacred. She turned to the first blank page, and for a moment her hand hovered over it, unsure where to begin. She had never used a manifestation journal before. Part of her felt nervous, another part strangely comforted by the blank space before her. It was a reminder that even when life fell apart, creation was still possible. The emptiness of the page wasn't a threat, it was a beginning. She closed her eyes for a moment and placed her hand over her heart, allowing herself to feel the softness rising inside her. She breathed deeply, letting the air move through her like a small renewal. When she opened her eyes again, she felt guided, as if the journal itself wanted to show her what to write first. The pen touched the page, and the words began to flow before she had time to overthink them. Her handwriting was slow at first, delicate, as if she were relearning how to trust herself. She wrote about the collapse, the fear, the exhaustion, but she also wrote about strength she didn't fully understand yet. She wrote about the small ember inside her that refused to go out. And then, almost instinctively, her pen shifted towards something softer, something she had forgotten in the chaos of the week: gratitude. As her hand moved, she wrote the truth she felt deep in her chest: gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion. The moment she finished writing the sentence, something inside her shifted. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was gentle, like a curtain lifting to let in a sliver of light. She felt her breath deepen, her shoulders loosen, her mind soften. The words held a vibration she couldn't explain. They felt alive. And as she stared at them, she realized she wanted to keep going. She wanted to fill these pages with intentions that pulled her out of collapse and into creation. She wrote her first affirmation slowly, letting the ink sink into the page like truth taking root. Then another. And another. Each one felt like a step forward. A small reclaiming of herself. A quiet act of rebuilding. She didn't write them from certainty, she wrote them from willingness. And sometimes willingness is the first miracle. She placed her hand over the journal and whispered softly to herself, "If you're watching this, repeat these with me." Her voice was gentle, steady, carrying the energy of someone who was rising from her knees and remembering her power one breath at a time. She wrote the affirmations one by one, her voice and intention aligning with every word. They were simple, but powerful, the kind of truths that settle into the heart and begin to shift everything from the inside out. I am open to receiving the blessings meant for me. Life is rebuilding itself around me in perfect timing. I trust that what I need is already making its way to me. Even in uncertainty, I am guided. I release fear and make space for abundance. The universe knows my heart and supports my path. I choose to believe in my future again. Every day, I become stronger, clearer, and more aligned. I deserve stability, peace, and prosperity. A new chapter is beginning for me now. She read each affirmation aloud, slowly, letting the sounds settle into the room like a soft invocation. With every line, her chest felt lighter, her breath deeper, her mind calmer. The collapse hadn't disappeared, but something within it was shifting. Something was opening, expanding, awakening. She felt it as surely as she felt her own heartbeat. She closed the journal gently, holding it against her chest as if it were a fragile piece of hope she wasn't ready to put down yet. And as she sat there in the warm glow of the lamp, she understood something she hadn't realized before: she wasn't rebuilding her life alone. The universe was rebuilding it with her, one intention, one affirmation, one quiet breath at a time. The next morning, she woke with a feeling she hadn't experienced in days, a quiet kind of clarity. It wasn't joy, and it wasn't certainty, but it was something that made her notice the light differently. The sunrise filtering through her curtains felt softer, warmer, almost intentional. She sat up slowly, running her fingers through her hair, and realized that for the first time since everything collapsed, she wasn't waking into fear. Something had shifted inside her, subtle but undeniable. When she walked into the kitchen, she noticed small details she had been too overwhelmed to see before. The plant on the windowsill had sprouted a tiny new leaf, her favorite mug felt comforting in her hands, and even the sound of the kettle boiling felt steady. These were small, ordinary things, but somehow they carried a different energy, as if the world around her was responding to the intentions she had written the night before. It felt like the universe had leaned a little closer. She checked her phone, preparing herself for another wave of stressful notifications, but instead she found an unexpected message from someone she hadn't spoken to in months, a simple note checking in, asking how she was. It wasn't life-changing, but it warmed her chest. The timing felt too precise to be random. It felt like the universe reminding her that connections still existed, even in the middle of rebuilding. As she walked through her apartment, she felt guided to clean a small corner of the room that had been cluttered for weeks. She didn't force it, it just happened naturally. And when she cleared that space, she felt her breath release in a way she hadn't felt since before the collapse. It was as if clearing her environment made room for something new inside her too. She didn't fully understand it, but she welcomed it. Later that afternoon, as she stepped outside to get some air, she noticed a small feather lying on the sidewalk, delicate, white, almost glowing in the sunlight. She paused, not because it was unusual, but because of how it made her feel. It felt like a sign. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a gentle reminder that guidance was closer than she realized. She picked it up instinctively, turning it over in her fingers, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. On her way back home, she overheard part of a conversation between two strangers passing by. She didn't know them, and the words weren't directed at her, but the sentence carried an energy she couldn't ignore. Sometimes everything falls apart so something better can take its place. She froze for a moment, feeling those words settle into her like a quiet truth. The universe wasn't shouting, it was whispering. That evening, she opened her journal again, just to see how her heart responded. The page felt different under her fingertips, familiar now, safe. She reread the sentence she had written the night before: "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion," and she felt it resonate deeper, as if the words were beginning to take root in her body. She took a slow breath, letting the softness of the moment hold her. Throughout the day, she kept noticing subtle shifts, moments of ease, small coincidences, gentle reminders that she wasn't walking through this storm unseen. Each sign wasn't loud on its own, but together they formed a quiet pattern she couldn't ignore. Something was moving. Something was aligning. Something was beginning to rebuild. As the sun began to set, she sat by the window with her journal resting on her lap, feeling a sense of presence she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't have answers. She didn't have solutions. But she had signs, and sometimes signs are the first bridge between collapse and transformation. If this moment is touching your heart the way it touched hers, gently type "I receive" in the comments. A single intention can open the door to everything that's waiting for you. The next few days unfolded differently, almost imperceptibly at first, as if life were rearranging itself one quiet moment at a time. She woke each morning with a little more steadiness in her breath, a little more softness in her chest. The fear was still there, but it no longer dominated her thoughts the way it once had. Something inside her was shifting, a slow but undeniable awakening. The collapse still echoed through her life, but it no longer defined the rhythm of her days. On the third morning after her discovery, she received an unexpected email. It wasn't a bill, a warning, or another demand for payment. It was a message from a former client she hadn't worked with in over a year. They were restarting a project and wanted to know if she was available. The timing felt surreal. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to breathe. Enough to create space. Enough to remind her that possibilities still existed. She stared at the screen for a moment, her heart swelling with cautious hope. Later that day, she opened her journal again, letting her thoughts spill naturally. She didn't force optimism or pretend the collapse hadn't happened. She simply wrote what she felt, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and a fragile sense of trust. The words flowed with more confidence now, as if the universe had confirmed that her intentions were not being ignored. Every line she wrote felt less like a request and more like a conversation with something larger than herself. Throughout the week, small confirmations continued to appear. A discount on a bill she expected to pay in full. A refund she had forgotten about. A message from a friend offering help without asking for details. These were not coincidences, she knew that deep down. They carried a synchronicity she couldn't explain. Each event felt like a gentle push, a hand on her back guiding her forward. The universe had begun to respond in tangible ways. Even her physical space seemed to shift with her energy. The cluttered corner she had cleaned a few days earlier now felt lighter, brighter. She added a candle, a small plant, and her journal resting open on the table. That corner became her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without feeling suffocated. It reminded her of her own inner transformation, small, quiet, but powerful. Her sleep improved. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because her spirit was no longer collapsing under their weight. She woke with thoughts that weren't entirely rooted in fear. She began noticing ideas returning to her mind, ideas she thought she had lost in the chaos. Small sparks of creativity. Gentle waves of inspiration. A sense that her inner world was beginning to rebuild itself, even before her outer world caught up. One afternoon, as she walked to the cafe near her home, she realized she was moving differently. More grounded. More aware. More present. She wasn't rushing through her day like someone trying to escape their own thoughts. She was walking with intention, with quiet strength. When she ordered her coffee, the barista handed it to her with a warm smile and said, "Something about you feels lighter today." The words surprised her, but she felt the truth of them settle into her. That evening, she opened her journal again, reading over the affirmations she had written earlier in the week. Each sentence felt different now, not just hopeful, but real. Alive. Rooted. She whispered them softly to herself, letting their meaning absorb into her skin. She felt gratitude rise in her chest, not as a forced practice, but as a natural response to the changes unfolding around her. She sat by the window long after the sun had set, watching the glow of the city lights flicker against the night sky. For the first time since her life collapsed, she didn't feel trapped. She felt supported. She felt guided. She felt the early stages of rebuilding forming beneath her feet, a foundation shaped not by fear, but by intention, intuition, and the quiet power of alignment. Her life was not whole yet, but it was no longer broken. It was becoming something new. The changes that had begun as gentle whispers soon grew into something more defined, more visible, more meaningful. She noticed it first in her posture, the way her shoulders no longer curled inward as if trying to protect her from the world. She stood differently now, not in defiance, but in quiet alignment. Her breaths were deeper, her steps more intentional. She wasn't simply surviving each day anymore, she was meeting it with presence, with a softness she hadn't felt in months. Work began to flow back into her life in small but steady ways. The former client who reached out earlier in the week sent her a second message, offering an even larger project than she expected. The proposal felt like a lifeline, a door reopening at the exact moment she needed it most. When she accepted it, she felt a surge of gratitude fill her chest, warm and bright, almost radiant. It wasn't just the work, it was the timing, the alignment, the sense that the universe was carefully stitching her path back together. Her confidence grew in small increments, almost unseen from one moment to the next, but unmistakable when she reflected on the woman she had been just days before. She no longer felt like she was drowning in uncertainty. Instead, she felt herself rising, slowly, steadily, as if being lifted from within. Each decision she made carried more clarity. Each thought held more trust. Each breath whispered a truth she was beginning to embrace fully. One afternoon, as she wrote in her journal, her pen moved with a steadiness she hadn't felt before. Her thoughts flowed without resistance, forming sentences filled not with fear, but with intention. It was there, on those pages, that the mantra surfaced for the first time, quiet, simple, but powerful enough to shift something deep inside her. Today I choose to believe. The words didn't feel forced. They felt like an awakening. A declaration. A promise to herself. She repeated the phrase under her breath, feeling its vibration settle through her chest. It wrapped around her like a gentle affirmation, not of blind optimism, but of trust. Trust in her resilience. Trust in the unseen forces guiding her. Trust in the truth that rebuilding wasn't just possible, it had already begun. The mantra became her anchor, a thread that kept her grounded as life continued to unfold. People around her began to notice the change, even if they didn't fully understand its origin. A neighbor complimented her smile. A friend commented that her voice sounded lighter. Even strangers seemed to respond differently to her presence. It was as if the shift within her created a ripple that extended outward, touching everything and everyone who crossed her path. She felt it deeply, energy meeting energy, alignment attracting alignment. Her days found a new rhythm. She worked with calm focus, took breaks without guilt, and allowed herself to feel supported by something greater than her circumstances. She practiced gratitude intentionally, not because everything was perfect, but because gratitude had become the fuel that kept her moving. And every evening, she returned to her manifestation journal, writing not just what she hoped for, but what she was becoming. There were moments when doubt tried to return, familiar shadows that whispered old fears. But now, those shadows didn't overwhelm her. She saw them, acknowledged them, and returned to her mantra. Today I choose to believe. It echoed through her thoughts like a steady pulse, guiding her back to trust whenever her mind wandered into uncertainty. As the week unfolded, she realized she was no longer waiting for her life to rebuild itself. She was actively participating in the reconstruction. Every intention she wrote, every moment of gratitude she practiced, every step she took with awareness, it all added up. It formed the foundation of a new chapter, a new direction, a new version of herself rising from the remnants of collapse. Her life was shifting from survival to rebuilding, and she felt it with every breath. The universe wasn't just responding, it was collaborating with her, co-creating a reality that reflected her renewed belief. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for what was coming next. The momentum that had begun as a whisper now carried a stronger, clearer rhythm. She moved through her days with a sense of presence she hadn't felt in months, almost as if something inside her had finally clicked into place. The heaviness that once clung to her shoulders was loosening, dissolving inch by inch. She wasn't rushing toward the future or holding on to the past, she was simply rooted in the now, the first true sign that healing had reached her core. Her workdays became smoother, her thoughts sharper, her creativity more alive. Ideas began to flow with ease, not from anxiety or pressure, but from alignment. She no longer felt like she was clawing her way back to stability. She was building it, one choice, one action, one intention at a time. There was strength in her voice again, confidence in her decisions, and a quiet courage pulsing beneath everything she did. She found herself smiling more, often without realizing it. Sometimes it happened while she was making tea, other times while she organized her desk or listened to music. They were small moments, nothing dramatic, but they reflected a deeper truth. She was emerging from the collapse not as the person she had been before, but as someone wiser, softer, and more attuned to herself. The cracks life created were becoming openings for light to enter. Her manifestation journal remained at the heart of her routine. She wrote in it every evening, not out of obligation, but because it felt like a sacred conversation with the universe. Some pages held gratitude. Others held clarity. Some carried hopes she wasn't ready to speak aloud. With each entry, she felt more connected, to her own intuition, to the subtle signs around her, to the unfolding guidance shaping her path. One night, as she wrote by the warm glow of her lamp, she returned to her mantra again, slow, steady, intentional. Today I choose to believe. The words flowed from her pen effortlessly, as if they were no longer something she needed to remind herself of, but something she had become. She repeated the phrase under her breath, feeling it settle deeper than before, anchoring itself in the quiet spaces within her. As the days passed, evidence of her inner transformation began appearing in her outer world. Opportunities arrived with timing that felt too perfect to be random. Payments cleared sooner than expected. A colleague recommended her for a project that aligned beautifully with her skills and long-term dreams. Every new development felt like a thread being woven into a tapestry she hadn't realized she was co-creating. The relationships around her shifted too. People who once drained her energy naturally drifted to the background, while others who uplifted and supported her began to come closer. Conversations became richer, connections felt more genuine, and the loneliness that had overshadowed her collapse began to fade. She was no longer walking through life in survival mode, she was walking in alignment. Her evenings grew peaceful. She lit candles, played soft music, and allowed herself to unwind without guilt. She was learning to rest, not because she was exhausted, but because she finally understood the value of nurturing her own energy. Her home felt warmer, her aura softer, and her mind clearer. She was rebuilding not just her life, but her inner world, the foundation beneath everything she hoped to create. One afternoon, she paused by the window, watching sunlight spill across the room in golden streaks. The moment was quiet, simple, but something about it moved her deeply. She felt gratitude swell inside her, not forced, not practiced, but natural. It rose like a warm current through her body, reminding her that even after collapse, life could still surprise her with beauty. And as she stood there in the soft glow of the afternoon, she realized something profound. She was no longer waiting for her life to change. It already had. Life began to open in ways she hadn't imagined possible just a short time before. What once felt tight and suffocating now carried a sense of movement, like the air itself had shifted. She woke each morning with a growing sense of possibility, the kind that starts quietly but expands with every breath. The weight that once held her down had loosened, making space for new energy to rise within her. She no longer felt like she was simply recovering from the collapse, she was moving beyond it. Her finances slowly started to stabilize. It wasn't sudden wealth or dramatic breakthroughs, but small, consistent improvements that brought steady relief. Payments arrived earlier than expected. An old invoice she had given up on was finally deposited. A client she thought had forgotten about her reached out with a generous offer. These small changes accumulated, forming a foundation stronger than the one she had before everything fell apart. It was as if the universe was rebuilding her life brick by brick, with intention and care. The work she received felt aligned, not draining. She no longer accepted projects out of fear or desperation, she chose opportunities that matched her energy and values. And unexpectedly, the more she aligned with this new standard, the more opportunities appeared. It was a reminder that saying no to what no longer fit created room for what truly belonged. She felt empowered in ways she had never allowed herself to feel before. Her creativity blossomed too. Ideas flowed through her like warm currents, bringing clarity and inspiration. She found herself writing more, not just in her journal, but in notes, plans, dreams, and small manifestations scattered throughout her day. Creativity no longer came from survival, it came from expansion. She felt it in her voice, her thoughts, her posture. It was a rebirth, subtle yet undeniable. The relationships in her life flourished alongside her inner transformation. Conversations deepened. Connections strengthened. People who supported her growth appeared naturally, almost magnetically. She began attracting friendships and partnerships that matched her new vibration, grounded, inspiring, nurturing. And without forcing it, she released relationships that had drained her spirit. It wasn't painful. It was peaceful, like shedding a layer she had outgrown. Her manifestation journal became her anchor, her compass, her safe place. Every evening she opened its pages with reverence, knowing each word carried energy. She wrote about what had shifted, what she hoped for, and what she was becoming. She documented the signs she received each day, the unexpected opportunities, the subtle coincidences, the moments of deep inner knowing. The journal wasn't just guiding her, it was reflecting her expansion back to her. As she wrote, she noticed her desires changing. What once came from fear or scarcity had transformed into intentions rooted in trust and abundance. She realized she no longer wanted to rebuild the life she had before. She wanted something more aligned, more meaningful, more reflective of her true self. She whispered to herself that she was ready for the next level, the next chapter, the next unfolding of her destiny. Her home began to mirror the expansion within her. She rearranged furniture, added new touches of warmth, placed flowers on her table, and opened the windows more often. The light felt different in her space now, softer, brighter, more inviting. It was as if her environment had been waiting for her energy to shift before revealing its true warmth. She felt comfort in being there, a comfort she hadn't felt in months. One evening, as she lit a candle and opened her journal, a wave of gratitude moved through her. Not the gratitude she had forced during difficult times, but the kind that rises naturally when life begins to align. She realized how far she had come, how deeply she had transformed, how much strength she had uncovered within herself. Her life was expanding in ways she had once only written about. And now, those words were becoming reality. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was growing, expanding into someone new, someone whole, someone aligned with the life she was meant to live. The expansion continued to unfold like a quiet miracle, each day revealing a new layer of alignment she hadn't known she was capable of receiving. It wasn't explosive or overwhelming, it was steady, graceful, almost rhythmic. She could feel life rearranging itself around her, not with urgency but with certainty. There was an undeniable momentum guiding her forward, a momentum she no longer feared, but welcomed with open hands. Her heart felt fuller, clearer, and more rooted than ever before. Her financial world strengthened a little more each week. She paid off one of her smaller debts, then another. The feeling of relief that washed over her was unlike anything she had experienced during her collapse. It wasn't just money returning, it was stability returning, trust returning, confidence returning. She realized she was no longer trying to escape crisis. She was stepping into abundance. And although she wasn't at the finish line, she could finally see a future where she wasn't fighting for survival. New opportunities continued to arrive, sometimes in ways she didn't expect. A collaboration that once seemed impossible came to life effortlessly. A recommendation from a colleague brought her a client who valued her work deeply. Someone she admired reached out to her with an invitation that felt perfectly aligned with her long-term dreams. None of it felt random. It felt orchestrated, as if something greater had been aligning these moments long before she knew to ask for them. Her intuition became sharper, more reliable, more familiar. She recognized subtle nudges throughout her day, moments of clarity that told her when to act, when to wait, when to say yes, and when to walk away. It was as if a new sense had awakened within her, guiding her gently and consistently. She trusted herself in ways she hadn't before. Decisions that once felt overwhelming now came naturally, grounded in inner knowing rather than fear. Abundance flowed into her life through more than finances. She felt spiritually abundant, emotionally abundant, energetically abundant. Her sense of self-worth grew stronger each day, rooted not in what she achieved, but in who she was becoming. She discovered parts of herself that had been dormant, creativity she hadn't explored, dreams she had pushed aside, visions she thought were too big. Now, they felt possible. They felt close. They felt divinely timed. Her manifestation journal became her place of expansion. Each page reflected not only her intentions but her evolution. She documented the blessings, the synchronicities, the breakthroughs. Reading her earlier entries felt like witnessing a past version of herself reaching for survival, and seeing her current self standing in the abundance she once prayed for. The journal was becoming a map of her transformation. A record of a spirit that refused to break, even when everything around her fell apart. She noticed that her energy, once guarded and tired, now radiated outward naturally. People responded to her differently, not because she was louder or brighter, but because she was aligned. She carried a presence of calm confidence, a softness rooted in strength, a glow that came from inner peace rather than external circumstances. Even in silence, people felt the shift within her. She had become a magnet for good things. Her daily routines felt sacred now. Lighting a candle. Opening the journal. Making tea. Sitting quietly by the window. These small rituals grounded her, nourished her, reminded her of the life she was consciously co-creating. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. She allowed each moment to unfold with ease, trusting that she was exactly where she needed to be. The collapse had taught her to surrender, the expansion taught her to receive. One evening, she looked around her home, the warm light, the small touches of beauty she added, the calm energy filling the space, and realized she was living in a reality she once begged the universe to help her reach. Not extravagant. Not perfect. But aligned. Safe. Expansive. Hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the deep truth that she was worthy of everything arriving in her life. Her future no longer felt like a distant hope. It felt like a path unfolding beneath her feet, one step, one intention, one breath at a time. As the weeks unfolded, her transformation began to ripple outward in ways she couldn't ignore. The quiet growth inside her now radiated so clearly that the world around her responded. People noticed her presence long before she realized she was shining again. The softness in her expression, the steadiness in her movements, the quiet confidence in her voice, it all spoke of a woman who had risen from her own collapse and turned it into alignment. She carried a glow that wasn't loud, but unmistakably powerful. Her work began to attract attention beyond her usual circle. A project she completed received unexpected praise online, drawing in new followers, clients, and voices that appreciated her craft. Comments appeared beneath her posts from people she had never met, telling her how her perspective or her words inspired them. She read each message slowly, feeling her heart expand with gratitude. It was surreal to be seen in ways she once believed were out of reach. One afternoon, she received an invitation to speak at a small event, nothing extravagant, but meaningful. The organizer wrote that they had followed her journey quietly and felt her story would resonate deeply with others. She hesitated at first, not out of fear, but out of awe. A few months earlier, she had felt invisible, lost, uncertain of her place. And now, someone wanted her voice. Someone believed her experience mattered. That recognition touched her in a place she didn't know was still tender. As she prepared for the event, she noticed how naturally her words flowed. She didn't script every detail or rehearse every sentence. She simply spoke from the heart, about resilience, surrender, rebuilding, and the sacred power of choosing to believe even in collapse. The audience listened with full attention, some nodding, some leaning forward as if absorbing her energy. When the event ended, several people approached her, thanking her for her honesty and strength. She felt overwhelmed, but in the most beautiful way. Her transformation continued to attract opportunities. One of her projects went viral, shared by someone with a large following. A company reached out for a collaboration she once thought was out of her league. Her inbox filled not with demands, but possibilities. These weren't random strokes of luck, they were confirmations. Proof that when she aligned her inner world, her outer world followed. She felt the truth of it settling deep in her bones. The recognition wasn't just professional. Friends who hadn't spoken to her in months reached out, curious about the shift they saw in her. People told her she seemed brighter, lighter, more herself than ever before. She didn't boast or try to explain every detail, she simply shared fragments of her journey, the collapse that broke her open, the journal that guided her, the alignment that rebuilt her. Her story wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And honesty carried its own beauty. In her quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the mornings she woke with fear in her chest, the uncertainty that shadowed her every thought. And now, she looked at her life and saw movement, light, possibility. The universe had not only rebuilt what she lost, it had expanded it. Strengthened it. Elevated it. The collapse had been a beginning, not an ending. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, she placed her journal on her lap and opened it to a blank page. She smiled softly, feeling the warmth of gratitude settle in her chest. She wrote about the recognition she had received, the opportunities unfolding, the unexpected blessings. But more than anything, she wrote about the deep peace she felt, a peace she had earned through surrender, faith, and alignment. She closed the journal and whispered into the night breeze, not as a prayer of desperation, but as a declaration of truth. She was ready for more. Ready for expansion. Ready for the life waiting ahead of her. The universe had shown her what was possible, and now, she was stepping into it fully. If her journey has touched your heart, feel free to leave a gentle comment below sharing how you feel, and if this story resonates with you, consider subscribing so we can continue walking through healing, alignment, and transformation together. In the quiet of the night, she looked around at the life unfolding around her and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a profound sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from perfect circumstances or easy days. It was deeper, born from everything she had survived and everything she had rebuilt. She breathed in slowly, letting the truth sink into her body. She was no longer the woman whose life collapsed in 1 week. She was the woman who rose from it. She stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer like a constellation of possibilities waiting to be claimed. The air felt still, warm, almost sacred. She closed her eyes and placed a hand over her heart, feeling the steady rhythm that had carried her through every fear, every doubt, every moment of breaking. That heartbeat reminded her of everything she had learned, that collapse is not the end, it is the clearing. It is the space where the universe plants new beginnings. The journal rested on the table behind her, open to a page filled with intentions, gratitude, and the truth of who she had become. That simple object, found on a day when she felt lost, had become a doorway into alignment. It held her story, her healing, her expansion. More than that, it held proof that she was co-creating her life with the universe every step of the way. She no longer feared the unknown. She trusted it. She walked back to her journal and traced her fingers over its pages, feeling a warmth rise in her chest. She realized that the universe hadn't rebuilt her life for her, it had rebuilt it with her. Every intention, every affirmation, every moment of surrender had been a building block. And now, what stood before her was not the life she lost, but the life she deserved. A life aligned with her spirit, her truth, her destiny. The woman who once felt broken now moved with conviction. She spoke with clarity. She made choices rooted in self-worth rather than fear. She held herself with tenderness, understanding that strength is not the absence of breaking, but the ability to rise again. She had become the version of herself that her collapsed past needed, the one who could hold everything with grace. As she sat down, she whispered the words that had guided her from the darkest moments to the brightest ones. Today I choose to believe. This time, the words carried the weight of experience. They were no longer a mantra of hope, they were a declaration of truth. She believed in herself, in her path, in the support surrounding her, in the limitless way the universe can rebuild what once felt lost. The room around her seemed to glow softly, as if reflecting the light she carried within. She felt ready, not just for what she had now, but for everything waiting ahead. The collapse had taught her resilience. The expansion had taught her trust. The journey had shown her that she was never abandoned, only being redirected. Her life was living proof that the universe rebuilds with precision, intention, and love. She placed her journal aside, took a deep breath, and allowed a gentle smile to form on her lips. She no longer feared the unknown. She welcomed it. She understood that every chapter she stepped into now would be shaped by alignment, not fear, by intention, not collapse. She felt the fullness of her transformation settle into her body like a soft exhale. She was ready for everything her heart had once been too afraid to ask for. And if someone watching her journey feels something awakening inside, a spark, a memory, a whisper of possibility, then this story has done its work. Because the same power that rebuilt her life lives inside every single soul hearing these words. The universe that rose for her will rise for them too, in its own perfect timing, in its own perfect way. If her story touched your heart, feel free to comment a word that reflects your energy right now, maybe rebirth, hope, alignment, or simply gratitude. And if you feel connected to this journey, you're welcome to subscribe so we can continue healing and expanding together. If someone you love needs a reminder that collapse is not the end, you can share this video with them too. And before you leave, let your heart offer one small gesture of gratitude in the comments. It may become the beginning of your own transformation.